The story of the genesis of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin can never really be told without also talking about Mt. Gox. Mt. Gox is one of the first and largest cryptocurrency exchanges on the market. While it grew extremely quickly, it had a colossal fall. How did this happen? How could Mt. Gox, the de facto standard and king of the cryptocurrency trading world, fall to its knees, leaving thousands of its clients left in the ditch? Let's explore this wild but true story, a first of its kind, a pariah, and a sign of new things to come. To really understand Mt. Gox's fall, we should spend some time talking about its beginnings. How did it come to be? Like many incredible stories, Mt. Gox comes from humble beginnings. And its beginnings really had nothing at all to do with cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. Towards the end of the year in 2006, a programmer named McCaleb came up with the idea for Mt. Gox. McCaleb was a talented and aspiring software engineer and soon-to-be entrepreneur. In fact, McCaleb has many claims to fame, as we'll soon discover. McCaleb was no stranger to technology. Over half a decade prior to his creation of Mt. Gox, McCaleb was the co-creator of the eDonkey network, which was a freeware peer-to-peer file sharing system. As a teenager growing up in the late 90s and early 2000s, I remember very well the days of Napster, Kazaa, eDonkey, and many of their variants. In fact, if it wasn't for eDonkey and all the others, who would have ever listened to bands such as Creed, Vitamin C, and Godsmack, and all those other alt and pop bands of the 90s? Anyway, this was an amazing era in internet technology, a time period in which media, including games, music, video of all kinds, and so much more, was freely available. And McCaleb was right at the heart of it all. He was the CTO of eDonkey's parent company, MetaMachine. These file-sharing platforms were addressing a growing market demand from users that wanted their media through the internet immediately and in front of them, rather than waiting in the mail for something to come in or having to go to a store to purchase. Unfortunately, they were all ahead of their time. But at its height, eDonkey maintained over 4 million active users, a huge following for pre-iPhone technology. However, in September of 2006, McCaleb and team agreed to a settlement with the RIAA, including a cease and desist from eDonkey and a payment, or some might call blackmail, of over $30 million to the RIAA. Why? To avoid copyright infringement. You see, the RIAA had finally woken up to all of the copyright infringement and decided enough was enough. eDonkey was not the only target, but they were one of the major ones. And while the rest of this story should and might just become a documentary of its own, McCaleb's story here is critical to his future. He learned to push and even go way past the boundaries of what the market would understand and tolerate, and that kind of entrepreneurial spirit would lend itself heavily to McCaleb all throughout his industrious career. To that end, just a few short months after the MetaMachine shut down in 2006, McCaleb was on to his next big thing. Magic the Gathering had an online version of its popular card game, and McCaleb saw a problem. There was no dedicated way for gamers to buy and sell their online cards. McCaleb simply wanted a way for people to easily buy and sell online trading cards for Magic the Gathering. And so McCaleb's new idea was born, Magic the Gathering Online Exchange. If that doesn't seem relevant to you yet, just wait. McCaleb knew that he would need a domain for his new idea, and so he bought one. And it was, well, you probably guessed it, mountgox.com, short for his new idea, Magic the Gathering Online Exchange. And for everyone that wondered how such an infamous Bitcoin exchange could be named Mt. Gox, now you know. But it didn't take long for McCaleb to move on to other, more interesting ideas that to him just held better promise. So after a few months, McCaleb decided it wasn't worth his time to build and maintain the Mt. Gox trading platform, and he decided to reuse the domain for other purposes. And here's where the story gets really interesting. In 2010, McCaleb saw this Slashdot article about Bitcoin, and he became enraptured by the idea of what Bitcoin was all about. In an interview, McCaleb once said, "I thought the idea was awesome. I've always been interested in ways the internet can make people's lives more free, and at that point, there wasn't a good way to buy and sell Bitcoins, and so I wanted to buy some. So as a side project, I made Mt. Gox and bought my first Bitcoins there." Keep in mind, by the way, that Slashdot article about Bitcoin was produced about a year after Bitcoin was released, showing just how early McCaleb got into and was enraptured by the idea of Bitcoin. On July 18th of that same year, Mt. Gox officially launched its services. Ironically, McCaleb recalls this at the time, saying, "As the company started to take off, I sold it." But why? Why did McCaleb decide to sell it? He explained it this way: "Mt. Gox is cool and it needed to exist, but it's not technically interesting, and I had no interest in running it long term." And so, just as he started it, he also sold it. And let me tell you, McCaleb went on to a few other things that did interest him. He was the CTO of Ripple, a very popular cryptocurrency, and after that, went over to become the CTO of Stellar, which runs the Stellar Lumens cryptocurrency, both of which have some pretty amazing technology additions to the world of cryptocurrency. Okay, so getting back to Mt. Gox. If McCaleb sold it, who was the new buyer? It was a French programmer named Marc Karpeles. Why did McCaleb sell to Karpeles, and for how much? These are two questions we simply don't know. Remember though, at the time Bitcoin was growing, but it was still incredibly small, trading at around $1 a Bitcoin. So while Karpeles did actually purchase Mt. Gox, don't think of it as a highly valued SaaS company trading at 10 times revenue multiple. It was probably a low-cost purchase. And just like that, the journey of Mt. Gox began. Throughout 2010 and into 2011, Mt. Gox and Bitcoin itself began to see tremendous growth. Now that Bitcoin had a conduit and a channel and a pathway for buyers and sellers to come together and easily buy and sell cryptocurrency, especially Bitcoin, growth was the inevitable result. However, when Karpeles took over, he learned pretty quickly that he was in over his head. In less than 4 months, the first publicly known security breach happened at Mt. Gox. A hacker, or group of hackers, was able to compromise a Mt. Gox employee computer and wreak havoc. They simply used that access to change the price of Bitcoin down to 1 cent, and then used a massive ask order to buy millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin instantly. Believe it or not, it worked. Amazingly, even after that breach, the Bitcoin price corrected back to market rates in just a few short minutes. But it proved that not all was peaches and cream for our new young and industrious new CEO, Marc Karpeles. 2011 also saw a few flaws in the Bitcoin protocol, which unfortunately Mt. Gox took the brunt of. As can be seen here in block 150951, a total of 2,609 Bitcoin were sent to invalid addresses and lost forever. While this couldn't necessarily be attributed directly to Karpeles or to Bitcoin, it did show once again that the world of Bitcoin, and especially that of online trading exchanges, was truly the Wild West of technology. It wasn't like banks, where if a wire was sent accidentally, it could be reversed and recovered. Unfortunately, in the world of cryptocurrency, one wrong mistake is typically irreversible. Fortunately for Karpeles, 2012 saw continued growth with relatively little news and action. Fast forwarding into 2013, throughout a number of other problems, issues, and trials, Mt. Gox continued to rise in popularity, up to a point where they handled well over 70% of the entire Bitcoin transaction and trade volume, and stood above all competitors as the premier Bitcoin trading platform. As you might expect, Bitcoin continued to steadily grow in both volume and price throughout 2013. But not everything was going well for Mt. Gox, however. In April, Mt. Gox abruptly suspended its platform for what they called a, quote, market cooldown. This announcement was abrupt and the signal of many red flags to come. The exchange completely shut down without notice, and trading was impossible for that short period of time. And commensurately, as one might expect, the price of Bitcoin dropped to less than 60 US dollars. Eventually, after this cooldown, Mt. Gox did resume trading, and the price of Bitcoin rose and even stabilized at 100 US dollars, a clear signal of continued demand and investor confidence regardless of the reliability of Mt. Gox itself. But for Mt. Gox, the negative news and issues continued to swirl over their heads. In early May, Mt. Gox was sued by its partner CoinLab for breach of contract. CoinLab was a US-based exchange, which, according to the lawsuit, claimed they had an agreement with Mt. Gox for Mt. Gox to hand over all of their US-based customers for trading. Also, in 2 short weeks after that, it became clear that the United States federal government already had a watchful eye over the wild and unregulated world of cryptocurrency. The US Department of Homeland Security issued a warrant and seized money from Mt. Gox via their payment processor Dwolla. This turned out to be a significant issue for the US federal government. Licensed money transmitters are one of the key conduits used by the government to identify financial crimes such as fraud and money laundering. While $5 million was seized by the United States DHS, it showed that Mt. Gox was wholly unprepared for the regulatory compliance requirements to operate under the satisfaction of US government. By then, the dominoes began to rapidly fall, spiraling Mt. Gox into trouble they could not dig themselves out of. Eventually, withdrawals in US dollar resumed, but they came at such a delay that few were completed in timely fashion. In November 2013, Wired magazine reported that customers were indeed experiencing delays of weeks or months in withdrawing cash from Mt. Gox, and that they had been completely frozen out of the US banking system. While Bitcoin as a currency continued to surge in price throughout 2013, showing promise and potential by breaking the $1,000 barrier for the first time ever, the polar opposite was true for Mt. Gox. Continued customer complaints of long delays occurred until February of 2014. Then, on the 7th of February 2014, Mt. Gox experienced a flurry of events, ultimately leading to its untimely demise. First, Mt. Gox halted all transactions on February 7th, blaming a bug in the Bitcoin code. Fear began to mount that this bug was a significant issue, and maybe it was a sign of more risks to come in the world of cryptocurrency. Bitcoin, like all crypto, is, after all, only as secure as the code that runs it. With the Bitcoin bug now corrected and most competing exchanges back online, Mt. Gox was still not operational. Having to answer to growing concerns from its customers, Karpeles refused to comment further about Mt. Gox's status, other than to say that new daily and monthly limits would have to be imposed for the future. With trading still halted in Mt. Gox, Karpeles abruptly resigned from the board of the Bitcoin Foundation and also removed all of Mt. Gox's Twitter posts on February 23rd. In response, the value of Bitcoin plummeted from its 2014 high of over $1,000 to just $188. To make matters worse, the next day, February 24th, 2014, Mt. Gox finally met its full and final demise. The Mt. Gox website went completely offline, leaving all customers in the dark. And Bitcoin dropped to a 2014 low of just $131. Was this the end? Did Mt. Gox signal the end of Bitcoin as we know it? At the time, many skeptics sure thought so, but it didn't take long for Bitcoin to recover in price. In fact, it tripled in value just days later into the mid-$600. In fact, this became Bitcoin's shining moment. Bitcoin finally proved that it was not forever attached to the hip of Mt. Gox and its incompetencies. Many other exchanges publicly distanced themselves from Mt. Gox, all claiming their own trustworthiness and reliability, though the future would determine that was not truly the case. Not for all of them anyway. Though that is also another tale for another story. So at the end of February 2014, Mt. Gox filed in Tokyo courts what everyone knew was eventually coming: bankruptcy protection. Mt. Gox claimed to have lost 750,000 of its customers' bitcoins and even 100,000 of their own. This amounted to a staggering $743 million at the time. Mt. Gox stated, "The company believes there is a high possibility that the bitcoins were stolen." Bankruptcy protection then extended to US courts in early March of 2014, and in 2015, Karpeles was arrested by Japanese police under charges of fraud and embezzlement. And so the waiting game began for Mt. Gox's creditors. While some of the assets have been tracked down to distribute to claimants, many are still waiting to this day. On March 14th of 2019, Tokyo courts found Karpeles guilty of falsifying data to inflate Mt. Gox's holdings, though he did not serve time in prison unless he commits another offense over a 4-year term. The courts also acquitted Karpeles on other charges, including the original embezzlement charges from 2015. The Mt. Gox users, however, are in much worse shape. Many, if not most, have still not been refunded their missing Bitcoin. Will they ever? One would hope so. The Mt. Gox website is still alive today, serving information around the court systems in Tokyo, and users have but to wait. While Mt. Gox had a meteoric rise, it also had just as fall of a crash, and it told the story of a truly unregulated, wild world of cryptocurrency. For Bitcoin, however, it also proved and showed that Bitcoin had a future, a survivability beyond just any one exchange, which proved to be incredibly important for the cryptocurrency all the way to this day. And it also taught users, be careful. Be careful where you buy your cryptocurrency. Never hold your Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies in an exchange itself, and always, always protect your own cryptocurrency holdings. Will we see another rise and another fall of another great and mighty online exchange? History tells us probably, but can and will Bitcoin survive that as well? Almost definitely.